Welcome to Keeping It Entrepreneurial, the podcast where we unravel the tales of launching, scaling, and savoring success with your host, the king of B&B, Heath Green, and the property prince, Josh Shepler. Come along as we share our experience launching and scaling a seven-figure property management business that we built and sold, along with candid conversations with remarkable entrepreneurs who've mastered the art of business and have an unbridled spirit for entrepreneurship. Get ready to ignite your entrepreneurial soul and fuel your passion. This is where we celebrate the hustle, innovation, sacrifice, and struggle of building a life worth living. This is Keeping It Entrepreneurial.
Welcome back, everybody, to Keeping It Entrepreneurial. This is a piggyback session off of our first session from Keller Williams Family Reunion, where we were discussing our conversation about the impactful Tony Robbins, where we have our guest Jamie Lindsay on here today as well. I know that first episode was jam-packed full of information, and we're not done. So we want to piggyback off of where we left off. Finish up our conversation about Tony Robbins, and then start our conversation about the Mel Robbins. So where we left off, one thing is losers react and leaders anticipate. You live too much in the moment and you become overwhelmed. And one of the biggest takeaways, and I think this was something that all three of us kind of agreed upon, and everybody we spoke with as well, he gave this analogy of seasons and really used the seasons to kind of lay out his entire message. And it was very impactful, and I had never really thought about it like that. And I know that we always say there's seasons of life and things change, but when you kind of look at in this aspect and thinking of the good times, the bad times, even, when you're in a season, you're also in another season, I think was really cool. So one of the things he said was, and we'll just start with age and we'll kind of piggyback off of that. And then no matter what business you're in, you're also going through seasons. So kind of think of it at that aspect. But it was 0 to 21 was spring. And he said this was creation, protection, growth, absorb, and learn. So those are the optimal years where you're kind of in a state of absorbing. You're a sponge. You're going through as much as possible. Even if you're an entrepreneur and creating your own business, those first years are going to be your spring. You want to kind of piggyback off that, Josh?
Yeah, and I think it's important to state that the seasons came from the patterns and the focus and the meaning that he was talking about of your life, and obviously the past, present, and the future. Summer was 22 years of age to 42, which is where I'm currently at, and where actually all of us are currently
all
at.
In summer.
Yeah, Jamie's getting ready to say
I'm
hello.
about to get over into the fall.
Yeah, but we're all in tank tops currently and flip-flops, so we're enjoying that. But that is what you test, where you testing what you've learned. You'll decide what you value in these years, which I truly understand that. It's time for relationships and kids and family this whole summer season. So Jamie, since you are nearing into fall, tell us about fall.
Fall is the 43 to 63 range. And as I think about going into fall, I'm really trying to mentally prepare, because I've never looked at the seasons like this. Same as you, heard about seasons, but I think about the horrible ice storm. If you live in Kentucky, everybody can remember that huge ice storm we had. And I did not personally prepare, because I just was like, that's not really going to happen. But I can remember laying there and hearing the ice hit the roof and thinking, oh my goodness. And so really no one around me really prepared for that. I don't think anybody in Kentucky was truly prepared for that. And so I think about, if I don't start preparing for the next season of my life, I'm going to be in that same state of a storm and trying to figure out then, what am I going to do? So I'm trying to now set forth a plan for the season that I'm going to be coming into for fall.
And the good point, and the note I made for that is, he said, in the fall season, you're going to either be reaping or weeping. And that is your preparation from the previous season. So whatever you did, whatever you sowed in summer is what you're going to reap or receive in the fall. And in those summer months, or summer years, I should say, like you said, you're testing what you've learned and you're applying, and you're truly deciding what you're valuing. And he said, that's where you make the most impact is in fall. You're taking charge, you're unwinding, and you're relating and reflecting back.
I've definitely got to get my hands on the plows because the summer months are almost over. So I don't want to be weeping. So I've got to get in the fields and get my hands on the plow.
Exactly. And I think, like, if you look at it and you're thinking about true seasons, like, we all love summer, but I think we all love fall a little bit more. But we're just scared. In Kentucky, we're just a little bit nervous because fall doesn't last that long. And we know that winter is coming. And I think we start thinking of all the things winter has with it. So then we don't enjoy fall as much. But winter, tell us about winter, Heath.
And just to kind of piggyback off that before we say winter, everything ends, but the good thing is something new begins. And I think as you're going through seasons of your business or your seasons of your life, if you think of it in that aspect, that something new is about to come, then it doesn't seem so daunting or fearful. Winter he used the age bracket of 64 to 84. It is leadership, mentoring. You're truly slowing down. You're laying out the foundation for the next spring. You're clearing for the next spring. If you've lived an abundant and full life and you focused on what you truly wanted to expand and who you are as a person, this is typically the happiest time of someone's life.
Which I loved that. And I took that note because I was like, really? Because I feel like so many people fear that time of their life. But then I guess because you start looking at like what majority of people have prepared for winter. And maybe if you look at your life, then a lot of people that maybe did not prepare. So that's your perspective around this season.
I mean, I even look at, and my nanny, for example, I felt like looking back now on her life, that truly was the key for her because she was pouring into so many others. She was always telling stories and using her leadership skills to tell how to get through things and making sure she was a true mentor and truly living and loving life. And it may be because of the generation that she grew up in, which was part of the analogy that he used, which, as a history buff, I was like, oh, this makes total sense. And if you compare or look at history or look at all the great leaders in the world, there is a pattern to their success. There's a pattern to the good and bad in life. And you can't change it, but you have to use it. And if there's one thing to always think of is winter is always coming, but winter is what makes you strong.
Yeah. And you can, he put ages to it, like in your life and the different seasons you've been in, but your business and entrepreneurship and this whole journey, you have seasons every single year. And at the convention, Gary Keller even said, and Tony Robbins said, with real estate currently, we're in a winter season. And, this is defined by ages, but your business can be in winter in that cycle for several years. People, there's no thing about it. And they're like, oh, are we coming out of it? You have to understand that in those years, that's where the strongest people and you're going to learn the most is in winter. You can't fear it. In the real estate space, the last couple of years, everybody's been in summer. And so it did not take the brightest bulb to sell every single house in the community because we were in summer. Everything was growing. Everything was great. Everybody was laying at the pool. Life was good. But in the winter, you have to have the skills. You would have to have prepared for winter and truly know how to sell a house, truly know how to do something. So I think going back to that, if you apply it to your leadership and your entrepreneurship, that you've got to be preparing always for winter if you're going to survive, the ups and downs and the valleys and the peaks of business and entrepreneurship.
That's where he said that winter was the time to get rich and that good time. Was that what she was going to say?
I was going to say
the words out of your mouth. That good times create weak people. And that's kind of where, you were saying that back in 2020 and 21, like the market was on fire. So, I mean, it was easy to sell, but now that we're kind of moving into that winter it's going to take, strong people and strong knowledge to move forward in that. But it also is a time to get rich.
Well, I mean, even if you look at our economy and no matter what, if you're not in the real estate space and you're in some other kind of business or whatever it is in your workforce. I mean, if you look, our spring and summer season were at like a record high. Things were going great for everyone. And when Gary Keller kind of talked, historically speaking, we were just a little bit above the trend. The unfortunate part is we spiked super quick rather than following that gradual trend over time. But it was something that was going to be expected. But now that winter's kind of hit amongst everyone, it kind of feels like even a bigger blow because we spiked so quick and then dropped so quick. But he did say, like Jamie said too, good times create weak people create bad times create strong people, and strong people create great times. And I think if you utilize the opportunities around you, and you think, hey, there's always going to be a spring coming and winter. What are you using? What marketing tools are you using? Are you back to the relationships with your clients? Are you back to focusing on the basics of your business during winter? It's the biggest opportunity to create and grow wealth. And he used the example of Sir Mike Templeton during the Great Depression, who, when he saw stock prices fall super, super low, went in and bought all the stocks, and then he knew spring was coming again. So when the economy flourished, he became a multimillionaire.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's one of those things that you always have to look at the opportunity of what's ahead and not be so stuck in the moment.
Yeah. And just throwing in some John Maxwell knowledge. I know he wasn't there, but it wouldn't be a podcast without him. But John Maxwell, even going back, this always says leaders see more and before other people because they reflect back. And that goes back to all these pattern recognitions that if you know what season you're in and what season you were in before and what season you're going into, you're always reflecting back. And he said reflection turns experience into insight, and the insight can push you to the next level. And that's why leaders are able to see what's coming next, because they know where they've been and they know what season they've been in, and they've been preparing for that. So if you're reflecting back on, okay, well, I didn't do this in the fall, then if you're not doing that, you're definitely not going to be prepared for the next season. And you're going to be in winter, and you're going to be in something that you've not prepared for. He said, going back to Tony, he said there's two forces that influence our decisions. And this is where we got into the meat and potatoes that we all loved. And then we came back and we started implementing immediately. Those two were state and your blueprint. And he said your state was the moment to moment. The blueprint, number two, was long term. That's your set of values and then how we treat others.
And if you match your blueprint, you're happy.
I've had to rip my blueprint up several times and be like, we need a new floor plan because it's not working. But I think that ties back into what are my values. Maybe I had the wrong values, or I was not truly knowing what my value was. But when I've sit and reflect around saying, does this support my values? And then I've had to redraw up my blueprint. So I think it's okay to say, like, it's okay to get new blueprints.
Well, and I want to take the opportunity really quick to kind of praise on Jamie a little bit, because I think this is really important. And I think a lot of our listeners probably are either heavily involved with youth or have their kids, or it doesn't matter your age in life where you can make an impact. Will you kind of tell the story of Marley and who Marley is and her age, and how you immediately came back, you taught this lesson, and she's already using it on the people around her?
Yeah, so she's like a little sponge, and of course she's in the first season of spring. So, I came back and I told her that I wanted to try something new, and I was talking about the Tony Robbins about changing, your state and whatever mindset you're in. And so she said, okay, give me an example. And we did some role playing, and, we were talking about go clean your room, and she was pretending to throw a fit, and then she would stand up. Yep, she's 5, and she said, I'm going to change my state, and I'm just going to go and do it. And I know we haven't got into the Mel Robbins yet, but we'll talk about this in a moment about the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I taught her that, and she takes allergy shots and, she has eczema and stuff. And so she was getting a shot just this week and they went to administrate it to her. And she said, hang on, I need to do something. But she was scared to get the shot. And she said, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And she let them give her the shot. So I think, it is important. Like if you can start that mindset in the spring with kids or people you have influence on, like they're already starting ahead of the game.
Yeah. Well, and that leads us into it because Tony Robbins said to influence another human, you have to know what already influences them. That was like, boom, like mind blowing for everything. But it's interestingly, you said obviously with blueprint, it's like you can change anyone's blueprint. And he said you can change anyone's blueprint if you change their state. So yes, like you can rip up that blueprint 1,000 times because it's not set in stone. You can build a different house every single time. That is the point of changing the state, that you're getting someone to change their blueprint and their values. Because if they value something now, you can change that by their state. And, I think it's interesting too, when I talk about core values and leading with those, and you look back on things and people say, what are your core values? If you were to ask somebody, what are your core values at the end of the year? They may list 5 core values out. And then you ask them, you say, well, look back over your life over this past year. What have you been valuing? And because you might want to value something, but if you look back and reflect back over your last 12 months, you're going to see what you truly have valued, because what you have done is what you value. And so I think that's interesting to some people that they're not in alignment with their values. They are thinking they value something, but truly how they've been living doesn't align with their values. So yes, you can definitely change someone's blueprint. So you can change that 100 times.
Well, we don't keep the same blueprint throughout life, even in our real life scenarios. You grow up at your parents' home and then you go off to college and then you get married. And then if you have children, maybe you need a bigger house. And then after everybody moves out, you're empty nesters, you may move into a 2-bedroom home without stairs. So we physically change our blueprints all through our life with the seasons we're going to, but then sometimes expect that I have these blueprints and I have to live exactly how I have it drawn up.
Yeah. And you can always like change your values, like your values, like change, and the things that you value change often.
So let's just leave with, I have 2 last points from Tony. And then let's segue over to Mel. So the last part was, everything you want is because it's going to change how you feel. And that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks too, because, as you're reaching for goals or things you want in life, it's because you're thinking it's going to change how you feel. And I think oftentimes you got to say, is this truly for the good or for the bad? Or is it just because it's a tangible type thing? And then the last thing is, emotion is created by motion. The way you move is how you feel. And I mean, that was evident from our 3-hour workout. But the more you're in motion during everything and through your seasons of life, it's going to change how you feel, and it's going to change how you can impact others.
Yeah. And if we're going to change the blueprint, obviously he said change your state, but he said state controls your performance, and our behavior and actions are based on our state. And then, so the question was from everybody, well, how do we change our state? And there were 2 ways that he gave us, which was change your physiology and change what you're focusing on, what we went back to the beginning, because obviously what you focus is what you feel. But by changing your physiology, it's how you move, you get into motion, how you're breathing, your blood sugar, all of that. So that's why he started off the entire session with us, getting our blood moving, changing our whole entire state, because we could have been standing there thinking of one way and we're going to deliver this message, but he immediately got us into a different state by changing our physiology. So in order to change somebody's blueprint, you've got to immediately get them. And he gave 100 examples of people he's coached and led, and, throughout the years of how he's made changes within them by truly just changing their state and changing that physiology, just getting them up and moving and saying, okay, let's go take a walk. Because I don't know about you guys, but I used to be a runner. Like when I was going through a rough time, in order to change my frame of mind and my mindset, I would just go running. And after a run or a workout or going to swim, you always feel much different because you're truly changing your physiology.
Yeah. Anything else you have, Amy, before we kind of jump over to Mel?
No, I'm kind of holding back, trying not to get to Mel, because I think I'm ready to get over there.
And because he said,
it was clearly established Mel was the highlight of Jamie's week in Vegas. I mean, she immediately started implementing things, even though she was scared that she was going to be called up on stage. She took the most from Mel. So,
well, my last thing, because clearly you all know, like Tony Robbins was like my aha, but mind you, like Mel Robbins was incredible too. Like I took 500,000 pages, but lastly, he just said, where your energy goes, your energy flows. So that's how we can segue. And now our energy will flow into Mel Robbins. So I guess with Mel Robbins, if you don't know her, she got famous by a TED Talk that generated 29 million views. She's a multiple-time New York Times bestseller. And then her TED Talk that she gave 15 years ago, I think it was How to Stop Screwing Yourself Over. She has, I think right now, the number one most followed podcast in the entire world. She's been a TV host, motivational speaker, author. And then what she's most famous for currently is the 5-second rule. And that's probably the biggest thing that we took out of the conference and that we came back. What I didn't know was that she was a criminal, or is, I'm assuming, still a criminal defense attorney. And that she covered the George Zimmerman case for CNN. She was an anchor, a correspondent. So I had forgotten about that. So yeah, she has all of this background knowledge. So who wants to start us in so we can give a little context into this 5-second rule, really what it is and how that came about for her?
Yeah, in 2007, 2008, obviously, those who know, it was a rough time economy-wise. Her husband had invested in a restaurant business. It was flourishing and doing great. So they said, why not have one when we can have two? So they opened a second restaurant. They mortgaged their house. They pulled out of their 401k. Obviously, she was a successful attorney, and basically poured their entire life into this restaurant dream. Well, then 2007, 2008, the economy crashed. Quickly, their business and their funds became wrapped up and were no longer performing assets and were costing them money instead of making them money. And they found themselves over $800,000 in debt. She talked about her mental state and literally, not wanting to get out of bed. She became vengeful towards her husband. She was aggressive and mean. She no longer worked out. She just became, buried in her sorrows and her current situations of what was going on. And she was a couple Manhattans deep one night watching TV and was watching NASA, launch a rocket into space. And anybody that has ever watched that or had, you immediately start to think 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off, and change happens. Well, she had this epiphany and she was like, hold on, what? And then, she started talking out loud and using this, and she was like, I'm going to test this. So the next morning, she decided she was going to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and make herself get out of bed and move forward and do the things in her life that were going to create change, to get her out of this rut and to create a positive momentum moving forward. And that next morning she did that. And I'll kind of let Jamie take it from here, because I think this was, she's been dying and holding it all in, because she got a ton out of this. So Jamie?
I think she came back and changed her name to Jamie Robbins.
Well, one of the big things when Josh earlier was talking about the meat and potatoes of the Tony Robbins, I hadn't thought about this, but one of the things she said is don't marinate like a human pot roast. And that's a lot of times what I do is I just lay there expecting something to happen, and I'm just marinating in it. And I can't tell you the times that I've thought about I should make this move or I should say this to someone, and then I don't do it. I just sit on it. and then someone else either has the ideal or they end up giving somebody the compliment, and I'm thinking, man, I wish I would have did that. So for me, just not sitting there marinating and pulling the trigger and actually taking that step to move on whatever that would be. It can be something minor, or it can also be something big. If you've seen the Facebook post where Josh and I are kind of terrified of roller coasters, and, as we get older in our age, and he's still young and pushing us to do stuff, he pushed us to do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I think about that adrenaline that we had, and I'm super glad that we did that, because I've taken that moment that we had in Vegas and riding that roller coaster, and I've used the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 on a couple scenarios since we've got home. And just that feeling that you have, and you're kind of shaky inside, but it just gives you that momentum to be like, okay, what's next?
Yeah. Because dreams don't happen by chance. They happen by choice.
Yeah. And with the 5-second rule, she said you got 5 seconds to make a decision. Like, you wake up in the morning, you're like, I need to go for my run. I've got to do this. We had 5 seconds to decide, are we going to ride this roller coaster? But exactly what you said, Jamie, is that experience, and trust me, I've postponed that multiple times, because we go to Disney twice a year. We go to multiple theme parks, and I don't get on those rides. And it started making me think back and reflect of, like, how many moments have I missed that could have brought me so much joy because I made a decision in those 5 seconds to not do it. And, I know that's very like getting on a roller coaster, but that was a highlight of our week, because like we conquered something that seemed so small. That was a fear. But every little decision adds up. And so I think that was the important part of, or the context of the 5-second rule, is that you've got 5 seconds to make a decision. And then that's where courage steps out. And she gave a whole presentation and a slide about courage. And it's the ability to do something that is difficult or scary. That 5 seconds gives you that, stepping outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, because you're one decision away from a different life.
Yeah. And sharing your ideas, like, it takes courage, because, courage shows up so different for all of us. And everybody on this call could be like, well, you know what? Like, what do you mean 5 seconds to get on a roller coaster? I do that every day. Well, she said sharing your ideas, speaking up or showing up. Like, for some people, they have to do the 5-second rule and say, okay, I'm going to go speak to this person. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let me go do it. Standing firm in your beliefs and values. If somebody tests that, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, standing firm in that. And some days, like she said, and I think, depending on what season somebody's in that's listening to this, some days it's the courage to get out of bed. That you may have to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're going through depression. You're going through a season. You're down in the valley of despair. That the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is what pulls you up out of bed. And it's just simply to get out of bed, pick up the phone, settle an argument, whatever it is. The 5-second rule works in a multitude of things in your life. That you're telling your brain at the end of that is get excited, and you're going to change that.
Well, I think life doesn't change overnight. It changes over time. And, for me, I've been on a weight loss journey for this last year and a half. And, you want to wake up and just be skinny one day. And, I didn't get to 325 pounds overnight. It was patterns. It took work, to get to 325 pounds. And I also read somewhere that says, choose your heart. It's hard being heavy. It's hard being skinny. Like, it's hard being married. It's hard being divorced. Like, you have to kind of choose your hard, and you can't expect that you just pulled the trigger on the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and life just becomes easy. It just means you took the first step to make a change.
Yeah. And just exactly what you said. And I took a note. She said there will always be an excuse not to do it. You get up in the morning, and like she said, you come up and you're like, okay, I'm going to wake up 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's cold that day and you want to stay underneath those warm covers, and you're like, okay, I'll do this tomorrow. But I love that she said you're one decision away from a different life. And you talking about your weight loss journey, like, you made the decision to change your patterns and lose how much weight?
147 pounds so far.
Wow. Like, that's completely life-changing. And then she said, stop thinking about what to do and do it. Count backwards. And I thought it was so interesting. And this has been studied and proven, and you guys can go look it up, that you have to count backwards. It doesn't work if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because you're telling your brain and training your brain. you count backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and don't change your mind. Do the thing that you know and that you've planned to do. But I love that because you're just literally changing how your brain thinks, and you're not giving yourself the opportunity to sit in it. You're going.
Yeah, because she kind of talked about humans are not wired to change. Our brain thinks it's dangerous. So therefore, we'll always be in a battle with what we should do and what we think and feel we should do. That's why life is against you. This will always be there. And that's something that this tool kind of uses to be able to get you to overcome that. And then she said, after you hit 1, you have to follow it by motion. So if you tell yourself the night before, I'm going to get out of bed and I'm going to get up at 5:30 to go work out at the gym, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you have to put yourself to get out of bed. You have to create the habit of moving forward to be able to continue to propel yourself. Because if you sit in fear, it gets bigger. Motion shrinks your fear.
I love that part because I will definitely sit in fear. Just like when she came out into the crowd and was going to pick someone, I was basically almost like a fainting goat before, and she was over on the other side of the room. Had she came down our aisleway, I probably would have just blacked out right there.
I had your back. But the basic part of that, and like what the studies have shown with that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, is that she taught us that there's 2 parts of your brain. There's a conscious and a unconscious part of your brain, and when it does that, when you count backwards, you're moving from one part of your brain to another. And you start counting, it pushes you into a new direction. And you push through the behavior, train yourself to go from one bias thinking to a bias forward action. And that's what the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 does. It tells your brain, no, I'm going to go there where I want it to go. Because if not, your brain is going to go back and forth, because the cognitive part of your brain is going to keep you from making that change. That's a natural thing that your brain does to protect you and keep you from risk, keep you from, stepping off of that ledge, whatever it is, that's natural. But by doing the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you are telling your brain what you're going to do versus your brain having to decide to do that in the morning, because your brain's going to keep you from making a change. That's truly what it does. And it says that she said your brain will fight you not to change. Your brain tries to stop you. And so
I think you have to ask yourself, like, someone else said it in another course that we were in, like, is that the best you can do, or is that the best that can be done? Because there's been many failed attempts to launch into space, even though they count it down to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I mean, we all know, like, there's been spaceships that have actually blown up, and there's things you're going to do when you step out that's going to blow up in your face, but you're going to have to count down again to accelerate.
Yeah, because we're truly not wired to change. Like, our brains truly are not wired to change. So if it's not something consciously that you're deciding to do that you're going to change, then your brain's just going to keep you safe and not put you into another discomfort.
One of the things she said too, by counting down, is once you hit 1, you have to also tell yourself, I'm excited. So like, you're changing not only your state and motion, but you're changing how you feel. So when you say that you're excited, whether it's something you're excited or not excited about, it's going to automatically propel you to move forward rather than sitting in that fear and not being able to continue.
Yeah. And she said, she brought the slide that said, just do it. And she said, the just acknowledges that the decision to do something takes place in a moment. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You have to face fear and do things things now and not later. I love that.
Yeah, because she said the just was the most important word of that. It wouldn't be as impactful if it just said do it, because not just do it later, not just do it when I'm not tired, not just do it it's just do it.
Yeah, and the small moves compound. And going back to the example, literally, Jamie, you were talking about of, sitting in fear, is she did come into the audience. And she said, she came into the audience of 17,000 people, and we were pretty far back, but she came into the audience and she said, I'm going to pick somebody to come up here, and then they've got to answer these questions and things. And I saw everybody's body language change. And then I was like, okay, well, you're far enough on that side, but my fear started to creep in, and I could feel your energy, Jamie. Heath is one of those people that were like hoping that they would get picked. And she said, I can see this person sitting there. She's like, I'm not going to pick you because you want to be picked. Then she would get closer to somebody else. And she said, okay, now as I'm getting closer to you, the fear starts changing. And then, like you said, then she went down the aisle. Then she went down another row. And then she looked at somebody and she could tell that, they were truly terrified. And that's what she was talking, is that the closer you get to fear, the bigger it becomes. And the further away she got from us, the more comfortable I got. Mm-hmm. And the closer, and that's how it works, like with fear, is like the closer that you get to it. So we all, tend to live these lives where we're avoiding fear and avoiding these things because we stay away from them so we don't have to start fearing them. And then, like you said, to your point, Heath, she said, if you sit in fear, it gets bigger. Movement and actions lowers fear. You're telling your body that you are in control.
Because change happens outside your comfort zone.
Yeah. And so what did she do with that girl? She picked her up out of the audience and she got her moving. Then she moved her away from her seat. Then she moved her closer to the stage. And then she said, do you want to do this? And the girl said, yes. She was shaking. She was crying. She was doing all these things. You could tell physically she chose probably the best person there besides Jamie to go up on stage, because other than that girl fainting, she was doing it all. And then she changed her state again. She got her up on stage. And at each point of that, she felt her and she would ask the girl, okay, do you feel better? And she'd say, oh yeah, I feel better in this now. Each step and each moment, and when she got into motion and got into movement, she was getting out of fear. She was like moving herself because she was truly moving through it. And we all probably can relate to moments in our lives where if we just sit in it, it gets so big.
Well, and that's what, the girl on stage was speaking of, is like once she got up there, she was no longer at a 10, like her level. It had dropped down, I think she said, to like a 7. And I thought, how powerful is that? Like when you actually just take that step. And even though she was standing up there in front of all those people, she wasn't as fearful as when she was sitting in it.
Yeah, for sure. And, we had talked about this after, and that moment of changing her perception and how she was able to move through fear, to me, I think it's going to change the rest of her life, because now she can see, I was able to do that and get through fear. And mind you, through that, she would have to open up. She would say, okay, you've got to open up and do this. Okay, do you want to open up this, whatever it was, the piece of paper? She would say, sure. She would open it and said, okay, now you've got to go on stage. Then the next one, she would get her up on stage and she said, do you want to open the next one? She said, yes. She just kept conquering her fear. And the next one said, okay, you've got to sing out loud. So she kept going through different levels of fear, but she kept her moving and getting through that. And just think about how much you could accomplish in your life if you got into movement and moved past fear. Because most of us, I can tell you 1,000 times I've moved further away from fear than moving towards it, and how much it's held me back or could push me forward.
But to piggyback off of that, I mean, if you think about, if you allow yourself to sit in fear, and she used the example of the greatest photo ever taken, which I can't remember all of their names, but there was multiple Nobel Peace Prize winners in that photo. At that time, none of them were. One of them was Albert Einstein. But she said, oftentimes when you're in a room, you gravitate to what you know, because we're creatures of habit. Whether it's, we know what for example, at church, we always sit in the back because we don't want to sit up front and have the attention on us. Or we walk into a cafeteria and we sit with our friends and we don't sit with other people that we might not know. But if you look at that photo, if all of those people in that photo would have segregated into what they know and allowed fear to consume them, some of the greatest things that have come to our lifetime would have never come to fruition. And I think each of us inside of us have something that is beneficial and impactful to create change, not only in our community, our personal life, our world, but globally as well. I mean, energy is contagious. It can trickle on to something else. Jamie used the example of teaching something to a 5-year-old that's going to help. I mean, she's probably going to go to her classroom, and she probably already has, and teach it to everybody else. Well, you never know what that change is going to do to somebody's life. Because she said, you're never too old, you're never too anything to begin your dreams to achieve what you deserve. And I thought that was really impactful, because oftentimes it's so sad to see some of the smartest and the most impactful people. And I can think of people that come to my mind immediately, especially going through school, that would never speak up, that I knew would always have the opportunity to create change, but they never shared their ideas. that could have created change or an impact. So I think that's always important. You never know, one word might be something that somebody needs to hear. And she used that this example has helped with suicide even. And she gave those some videos, and I was like, oh my gosh, you never know what your words could do to change someone's life that needs to hear it in that moment.
Well, that was the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is what made her go viral to millions and millions of people. It was just something she thought was a simple concept, which now she's discovered by people sharing it has truly saved their life. Because, we take it for granted that there's these little decisions. It doesn't go back to just making our dreams come true and going for a run in the morning. And in her example that she gave us and sharing that gentleman's story with us is that the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 saved his life because it changed his brain to be in control, that he had decided that day he was going to jump off of that ferry, I believe it was. He went to the edge and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and moved back from the edge. And that gives me cold chills to think about that. And, she teared up because how many times, if you could be that in control of your thoughts, could it change your life? And truly, obviously, in that moment, it saved his life. And he was later able to share that with her. But it's simple things that change our life that we try to overcomplicate things. And by just making the decision, saved his life, which, I think in that moment for me, I was just thinking about my own life. It's like, wow, what does it matter like about all these simple things if in that moment, like something like that could truly save someone's life to change the decision that they're going to make for the day.
And I think something also is, and a common trend that all three of us have kind of discussed and are really working on personally, is share your story. I mean, if you look at some of the greatest leaders in the world, actually, if you look at all of them, and some of these motivational speakers, and even Tony and Mel, they all share and have a relationship with their story. They're not afraid to speak of how and where they've come from, the highs and the lows of their life, because your testimony is your testimony, but someone always could hear that to learn and grow from. Plus, you as a human being can also learn and grow from and not allow yourself to step back into those old patterns or habits or the biography or the decisions to take you back to that point.
Well, I look at them and I have to be reminded often because, all we see is the fame and glory that they have, but they're ordinary people that turned into extraordinary by sharing their story. Like even Oprah, who is one of the most influential people, started out as an ordinary person. She didn't grow up rich and just, with the silver spoon in her hand, just turned into an extraordinary person. She shared her story and went from ordinary to extraordinary, which can happen to any of us.
Yeah. You don't have to hit the sperm lottery to be successful in life. You can take no matter your circumstances and to create an extraordinary life, but also to contribute to others' lives around you. And I think oftentimes we push our story down because we don't think it's as impactful or big or life-changing as others are. But each moment that God has given you in life is meant to happen for a reason, and it's meant to be shared for a reason.
Yeah, 100%. And if you have, and that just goes back, and I know we're kind of going off on a tangent, but if it goes back to, a bigger vision for your life, that if you can look at like all the setbacks and different seasons and things in your life, if you can just look at them as part of the story, you know that it's going to be a really good movie, because every good movie has plot twists, they have setbacks, they have all of these things. But if you think about at the end of the movie in your life, at the end of the movie, then it's just part of your story. And if you look at all of these incredible authors and coaches and leaders, they have had incredible stories. And if they had stopped during the setbacks, none of us would be able to have learned from them. And Tony Robbins, if he had stopped when his mom was beating him and he lived such a horrific life growing up and all of these different things and going through bankruptcy and being evicted from his apartment, if he had stopped, then he wouldn't have been able to impact 4 million people at his seminars. He would not have been able to have fed 850 million people on track to have fed 1 billion people. So our stories will determine our destiny. I truly do believe that.
Yeah, I think every problem has a plan, and it's hard when you're in that problem to see that's part of a plan. And that, when your setbacks are setups, and it's when you're in that, it's very hard to see. Just like if you're hiking and you're at the bottom of the hill, if you're looking up at the hill, it's very hard to see that you're going to get there, but you get there one step at a time. And then there's this plan that evolves. And when you're up there looking at the views, it's all worth all the pain that it took to get there.
Yeah, 100%. Because we don't want to take it day by day. We want to always, again, move away from that pain and move away from that fear as quickly as possible. And I think, the $1 million question, I had somebody asked me the other day, they were going through a situation for the second time in their life. And they said, what advice would you give me to get out of this? And I said, have your own definition of what it will take to get out of that. Don't put things around it, what other people said. If you want to stay in grief, say, oh, you got to get over this. You've got to get out of bed. Make that your own definition. Allow yourself the time to grieve and get past that. Don't set a time limit on it. Everybody's going to be different of how they grieve, how they get over things, but you do have to get back up. Yeah. And once the pain is too great, you'll make a decision. And going back to all of these tools, if you want to change your state, you've got to change your physiology. So if you're in that moment, go for a run, go do something. And what I've learned from all of these people is when they've been in these situations and they've been in depression, they've been in all of these setbacks, they've went and served others at a super high level. They went and set up things much bigger than themselves, because it takes the focus away from you and it puts it on someone else. And like you said, Jamie, it's in a different gratitude. Like when you start focusing on other people, you're not focusing on your problems and you're not focusing on what you're going through. You're focusing on helping others. So just changing that mindset around that will get you out of it much faster than if you're just laying in it and thinking, oh, poor pitiful me.
Well, and if I go through something twice, it's hard when you're in it, but I really try to think is, okay, what lesson did I not learn the first time? If I'm having to go through this again, just like if you have to repeat a course in school, or if you fail the first time, you have to retest, is, okay, what did I not learn the first time that I need to get for the second time so I can nail it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And John Maxwell said, with failure or something, if you're repeating it, when you're going through it, you can either learn from it or you can leave it. And so if you're going through a setback, you really need to learn in that moment. Like you said, what can I learn from this right now? If you're not reflecting and kind of looking inward on that, then you're just going to leave it. So there is a likelihood that you're going to repeat that pattern because you did not learn from it. It doesn't say that if it happens again, that that's your fault and you didn't learn from it. But oftentimes with failure, if you're continuously repeating it, then you likely didn't reflect and kind of learn from it the first time.
So before we wrap up, we could continue to go on, and it's sad that, we're just giving the Cliff Note versions of everything, and I think it's going to continue to show up in multiple other podcasts that we do. But do either of you all have any closing notes before I kind of close this out?
No, but I did want to with Mel. This is, something separately I learned. We'll kind of rush through these because I think they're really important for people to know. It was on a different thing that she gave about avoid goal setting mistakes by asking 6 great questions. These are like actionable items that people can write down and talking about goals, because I think, some people, even if it's, I don't know, what is this, March, that they think, oh my gosh, I didn't do my goals. Like I'm so far behind, I can't do them. Nope. Put that myth behind. You can reset your goals. You can do it. If you have not done that, then now is the time. She said, make goals that you have connections to. And I think we all do that. We just go into, okay, well, I need a 6-pack ab. I need to do all of these different things because society tells me to. Change is hard. And so she said, you have to know these 2 things. Where am I and who am I right now in order to set your goals? And what do I actually want for the year? What do you actually want for 2024? Number 1, she said, questions that you have to ask. What were the highlights from last year? She said, get out your phone, get your camera roll, do an audit of all the highlights from last year, because we oftentimes get to the end of the year and we don't remember all the different highlights, all the different birthdays, all the things that you've truly done throughout the year. What have you forgotten about? Number 2, what were the hardest things this year? What were the hardest things about 2023? The moments that you struggled, went through, because again, you're reflecting, you're looking at your patterns. Number 3, she said, what did you learn about yourself last year? You're not the same person you are today that you were last year. So that number 3, what did you learn about yourself last year? Again, reflection turns insight into experience. Her number 4 question is, what are you going to stop doing? What are you going to stop doing this year? Number 5, what are you going to continue doing? Because there's a lot of things that we don't give ourselves credit for that you want to continue doing. You want to continue doing your morning ritual. You want to read your daily devotional, that you have been walking every single morning. There's a lot of things that you want to continue doing that you don't acknowledge, that you want to set all these new intentions. Number 6, what do you want to start doing? And truly thinking why you want to start that. And she said, you can't make someone do what they don't want to do. And that applies to yourself as well. She said, she wants to get fit, but she doesn't want 6-pack abs. So she's not going to do if she said, I want 6-pack abs, she's not going to do the hard things to get that, because she doesn't want to get 6-pack abs. She said she wants to work out to feel better, to live longer, to have a deeper meaning. So that's going to make her do the hard things. So establishing why she wants something, what connection she has to it. And she said, when you answer these 6 questions, you're having to think about having the best year of your life. And she said, it's like programming a GPS. If you're sitting in your car, she said, to get a set of directions for where you're going to go next in your life, looking at that, you have to say, you have to know where you want to go first, right? When you get in your car, these 6 questions will help you answer these questions. And GPS for the next year of your life says you have to know where you want to go, number 1. So looking back over that last year answers all those 6 questions. It gives you the knowledge and the wisdom from your life to give you a sense of direction about where you're headed next. But you also, she said, have to have another coordinate, and that's, where am I? And she said, you can't get directions unless you know where you're at and where you're going. And so that's why those 6 questions are so powerful, because and you've reflected back and you know where you're at currently and where you're going. And if you're going to go in a direction, then you need those 2 coordinates. And I love that analogy that she gave of getting in your car and looking at your GPS, because it is true. You've got to know where you're at and where you're going. And those 6 questions, if you've written them down, and we can put them in the show notes, will guide you and allow you to know, this is where I'm at and this is where I'm going. So if you've not really set the intention of your year and you've planned your year, then those were super powerful to me to kind of reflect back and kind of take another directions with goals for the year. And that was Mel who gave all that advice. So we can put that all on here and give those 6 questions.
Yeah, because you always have a relationship with your goals. And goals change over time, and it's never too late to kind of pivot and recreate your blueprint. Jamie, do you have anything else?
Yep. Just so for me, for the wrap up, I think it's very simple, is just kind of how she started on there is, this year and ... and then end it with just do it. So start it and then implement it quickly.
Well, Jamie, taking away the ending for me again.
Sorry.
Me and you a telepathy same way today, which is a good thing. And I love that you're speaking up and sharing your influence. So, but yeah, so I'll just kind of close this out with, knowing what you need to do is the easy part. The how is the hard part. Action is truly the answer. The only thing that gets in the way of what you want is the willingness to work for it. Nothing comes easy. You have to put in the work. And then goals and dreams don't happen by chance. They happen by choice. So for us, as we kind of close you guys out today, what Jamie said is, right now, say, this is the year I ... And I'm going to count you down from 5 to 1. And I just want you to do it. Put pen to paper, write what you want out of this year, take those actionable items, and immediately set them into motion. So this year I want to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Keeping It Entrepreneurial. And be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. Don't forget to check out the show notes for those actionable items, to stay engaged for future episodes, and how to stay connected with Josh and Heath. And if you found value in today's episode, leave us a review and please share with others.